Hello guys, welcome back to my podcast, Conversations with Zelia, with your host Zelia Lorraine. Today is Wednesday, June 26, 2024, and I'm sorry that I haven't made a podcast episode sooner. It's just a lot of things have been going on and I was able to find time to make a new podcast episode, but alas, I'm back. So today in this episode, I'm discussing crossover success when it comes to black musicians. Or not just black musicians, pretty much black and ethnic musicians in general, but namely black musicians. And what prompted this podcast episode was me having a conversation with brother in regards to the late great Michael Jackson. Because as we all know, when Michael crossed over, we all know that people took issue with him crossing over, but the fact that coincided with his skin changing due to his skin disorder with vitiligo. And that would probably make this podcast among pretty much the research I've done over the years and me watching episodes of the Sun. So today's episode is called the crossover Kerfuffle. And pretty much in this episode, I pretty much discuss how crossing over for black artists, pretty much black and non-black ethnic artists in general, is pretty much like a double-edged sword. And to preface this podcast episode, I'm going to bring up two major fictional examples from the movies, The Five Heartbeats and Dreamgirls. Now let's start with The Five Heartbeats. Anyone who watched The Five Heartbeats, but for those who are living on a rock do not know what The Five Heartbeats is. The Five Heartbeats is a 1991 Robert Townsend directed movie featuring a fictional boy band called Five Heartbeats in their rise to stardom in the 1960s. And initially, it was claimed that the Five Heartbeats were based on the Dells, who recorded whose picture was shown at the end of the movie, but recorded a cover of A House Is Not a Heart for the movie soundtrack. But Robert Townsend later on would say that it wasn't just about Dells, it was about various R&B male artists of the 60s, like The Temptations, The Four Tops, Otis Redding, etc. But there's a scene, which I thought I'd think about doing an analysis podcast episode on Five Heartbeats in regards to the love interest Tanya, but enough about that. But there's a scene in The Five Heartbeats, if you watch the movie, where this white guy visits them while they're on tour, and it's bad enough they're living in crap, pretty much during the tours, having crappy hotel accommodations, like living in these crappy hotels and motels and all that. But what infuriates the band and their manager Jimmy was the album cover for their album, which features a bunch of white people at the beach, which alludes to a common practice that I'll get to later on when I discuss the 1960s, later on this podcast. And they take issue with the cover, and the white guy justifies it, saying that the cover is that's their only way to cross over, which leads to an argument between the band Jimmy and the band and Jimmy, with Dresser being the only one co-signing it, while Eddie Kane and JT think differently. Let me pretty much recite the quote why do we cross over? Why are Negroes always crossing over something? And they didn't say Negroes. I'm just going to sugarcoat it for this podcast episode. What's the matter? But let me repeat that. Why do we cross over? Why are Negroes always crossing over something? What's the matter? They can't accept our music as long as they can't see our faces. Man, take it easy on the dude is the Big Red's idea. It's a good one too. First, we build a strong crossover audience, then we can come out strong. That's BS, and you know it. Crossover is nothing but a double cross. Once we lose our audience, we'll never get them back. Next thing you know, they'll try to change our sound. They'll have us sound like white boys. The white boys sound like Negroes. They're the ones making all the money. Tell me something. How come they never cross over as us? I never seen 5 Negroes on Elvis Presley's album cover. And the one part of the quote, crossover ain't nothing but double cross, that is a very important theme in our podcast episode. Which is very correct. You don't see white artists crossing over to black artists and vice versa, but not vice versa. And them stating that crossover about double cross and that once they lose the audience, everyone get them back is pretty much referencing how when our black artists cross over, they at the same time they always alienate their black fan base, which I'll get to, which will be a recurring theme in this podcast episode. And the next example I want to bring up is the movie Dreamgirls. Namely, the scene in the movie where Curtis, being the sly fox he is, convinces Jimmy Early to reinvent himself as a Sinatra-esque, easy-listening singer named James Early, and have him singing Rat Pack-esque ballads at a Miami nightclub. And the reason why I stayed there because right before the performance, they had a comedian making bigoted jokes. But Jimmy, and I forgot to put in a spoiler alert for this episode since I'll be bringing up certain, even though they're only scenes from the movie, I'm bringing up certain spoilers from the movie. But during the performance, Jimmy reverts back to Jamie Early, which alienates one of the audience members who's played by the cast director who winds up leaving. And for years, until I did not realize this till I rewatched the movie, and saw a comment on YouTube from that scene. But if you look closely, one of the white customers is shown staring at Dina, and they make notice of this by pretty much showing the white dude staring, and then cuts to Dina, and then cuts to Curtis. And this catches Curtis' attention, which winds up influencing his decision to put Dina as the lead singer. Don't believe me, just rewatch the scene and you know what I mean. And for those that don't get it, by Dina catching the attention of the white dude, she's pretty much appealing to the white audience, which pretty much makes her crossover appealing. And then there's also the fact that she's played by Beyonce, a light-skinned black woman, even though the role in the stage musical, the role was originated by a dark-skinned woman, Shirley Ralph. And then another thing to put into consideration is in the 2006 movie adaptation, they make it blatantly obvious that the dreams are based off the Supremes. From switching location from Chicago to Detroit, and then having him relocate to Los Angeles. I mean, come on, why do you think Smokey Robinson was big mad over the betrayal of Curtis? And the reason why I brought these things up, because they'll become very important in our conversation. But now let's get into the history of black artists and crossover success. And it all starts with the 1950s. Now in the 50s, the only artists that seemed to have crossover success or known was the jazz singers like Ella Fitzgerald, Sarah Vaughan, and the like. But then in the mid-50s came the rise of doo-wop and rock and roll. Now we all know that both doo-wop and rock and roll did a creation of black artists. And one of the most popular doo-wop groups to become popular was Frankie Lyman and the Teenagers, which was a multiracial doo-wop band consisting of black and Puerto Rican teenagers, fronted with a young frontman named Frankie Lyman, and they had a lot, and their most well-known hit was Why Do Fools Fall in Love? Why do fools fall in love? Among other hits, and we all know that their lead singer Frankie wound up having a tragic life, which I'll get to when I do a podcast episode, Why Do Fools Fall in Love? And then came the rise during the rise of doo-wop, there was the rise of rock and roll with black artists like Chuck Berry, Fats Domino, and Little Richard leading the charge. And additionally, a lot of these artists, they were only become successful. But with the success of these black artists come these bland white cover versions of their songs. Like, if you watch for example, in the Little Richard movie, they did a scene of Little Richard recording Long Tall Sally and juxtaposed it with, I forgot the name of that white singer. He's Pat Boone recording a slowed down, bland version of it, which was a common 50s practice. They would have white singers like the likes of Pat Boone make down-tempo, bland versions of black rock and roll songs. Kind of like when Taylor Swift did a horribly bland cover of September by Wind and Fire. Which I know I'm going to get attacked by the Swifties for stating that, but I don't care. And don't even get me started on Elvis. Because don't believe, consider back, some of his earliest songs was written by a black songwriter, which I forgot the name of the black songwriter. I think it's some Otis. I know it's Otis Blackwell. That was the name of the songwriter. He wrote a few of Elvis's earliest hits, like Don't Be Cruel. He pretty much, as Michael Jackson, who will be mentioned later on, I'll probably mention a bunch of times in this podcast episode, stated, he died pretty much penniless. And other singers that also found success was Ray Charles with songs like What I Say and Nighttime the Right Time. Dina Washington, Ruth Brown, and I can go on. And also the Drifters with his ever-changing lineup, who had a multitude of hit songs like Stand By Me, Spanish Harlem. No, not Stand By Me. Because Stand By Me was I keep getting the songs mixed up because Stand By Me was recorded by Benny King as a solo artist, not when he was with the Drifters. Spanish Harlem, White Christmas, Up on the Roof, I can go on. Then let's get into Motown's golden age. So in 1959, a man named Berry Gordy, an ex-boxer and a songwriter who wrote songs for Jackie Wilson, founded Motown Records with a loan from his sister Esther. In between its inception in 1972, when they went Hollywood, they had more than 100 hit songs. It made artists like the Supremes, the Temptations, the Four Tops, Marvin Gaye, Stevie Wonder, the Jackson 5, and many more famous. And the reason why I brought up Motown, because Motown, if you watch some of their unsung, Motown, they had to say, if you were to look at pretty much Motown's MO, they were like pandering to crossover success. Concerning how they treated certain artists that weren't their golden doves, like the Supremes, the Miracles. It confirms my theory, right? And a good example would be the Marvelettes. The Marvelettes, they gave if you ask any person my age, or even any person that's didn't grow up in the 60s, not know who the Marvelettes is, or bring up the song Please Mr. Postman, they're going to associate it with the Beatles version of it. Because Please Mr. Postman, that was the number one, the hit, that was Motown's first number one hit, and the hit that put Motown on the map. And how do the Marvelettes get repaid? By being pushed to the side in favor of the Supremes. And you can view their unsung episode discuss this, or read books, or look it up online. Although a lot of intergroup group conflicts wasn't helping, and please excuse the noise in the background. First, one of their members, Juanita, wound up leaving due to the Motown staff bullying her over a slip-up she made during an interview. Then another member, Georgianne, she left because of health issues. She had, if I remember correctly, lupus and sickle cell. She had lupus and sickle cell anemia. She wasn't able to perform for the sake of her health. Then Gladys, one of the founding members, she wound up leaving because to pretty much get married and start a family. And then Motown cared so little for the group that Wanda, she was pretty much tasked with their last album was pretty much a Wanda Rogers solo album. Rest in peace to, if I get that, rest in peace to all the departed members of the Marvelettes. Wanda, Gladys, Catherine, Georgianne. May they rest in peace. Because in the Marvelettes, they really did not deserve the treatment that Motown dished out to them. But then again, as Gladys stated, I'm paraphrasing, they're already showing preferential treatment to the Supremes, even though the Supremes, when the Marvelettes became famous, the Supremes, they were still struggling to get a hit. And ironically, it was the Marvelettes that did give the Supremes a big hit with by rejecting Where Did Our Love Go? Because it wasn't their style. And you really got Motown's history is really sad and messed up, namely because they screwed over a lot of acts just to put all their time and money on the Marvelettes. Though, to be fair, some of those acts, there was also self-sabotage as well. And then now we cover the Marvelettes' last album. Only Wanda is in the album cover. And then when Gladys, years later, she wanted returning to the music industry and she tried to reform the Marvelettes, but she couldn't because this a-hole named Larry Marshak pretty much owned the rights to the Marvelettes name and used that to create these great value Marvelettes that had none of the original members. And Gladys and Catherine, they had a fight with this Larry Marshak a-hole just to earn the rights to their name back. And for those asking how the rights ended up in Larry's hands away, according to Gladys, either Smokey sold the rights of their group. It was either Barry lost the rights to their group name in a poker game, or Smokey sold the rights of their name. But they lost the group name and Mary Marshak brought them, and that wound up happening with a lot of other groups to the point it led to having the relatives of the surviving members and the relatives of the deceased members trying to fight for the rights of the group's name, which led to an act that was championed by Mary Wilson, may she also rest in peace, called, I forgot the exact title of the exact name of the act, but it's been signed in a lot of states, and pretty much the law says that you cannot use the name of a certain group unless you're the original member or something to that effect. And that whole lawsuit took a toll on Gladys, who wound up having health issues and wound up passing away in 2011. If you get, like, the Marvelettes, they're in my opinion one of the most underrated girl groups of all time. Like, they deserve a spot on the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They literally gave Motown their first hit, and they're pretty much not in the history books or as a footnote. And then I know there are other tragic, and then there's Florence Ballard, who was the initial lead singer of the Supremes, and which it was the one that helped gave the Supremes the group name. But when Diana when the Supremes became lead singers, or became famous, that's when they started showing all their attention towards Diana, which a lot of it stemmed from Diana and Barry's affair with each other. To the point, and it got to the point where they gave one of Florence's solo numbers, People, to Diana, which I know must have devastated Florence. As we all know, Florence, she started acting out as a result of that, which later did get kicked out of the group. And she tried to pursue a singing career, but a solo career, and it didn't go anywhere since she wasn't able to pretty much use being a member of the Supremes to pretty much promote said solo career, because Motown, they had a contract where the artists, when they pretty much got their contract with Motown, they couldn't use their time with Motown to promote themselves, which put dampers on their careers, like with Mary Wells and the like. We all know that Florence, she went from being a supreme to living in poverty with her 3 young daughters, and dying just as she was planning to make a comeback. Then with Mary Wells, she left the label when she found out they were using her money to fund the Supreme's career, and she pretty much had a horrible post-Motown career, and also got into some family drama with the Womacs, which is a story within itself. And seeing how a lot of the acts were ruined makes it disingenuous when Berry Gordy have later stated that Michael would still be alive if he was in Motown. Which, sir, you obviously haven't looked at your track record. But let's conclude with this. And then, even though it's not Motown related, before I close off my section of the 60s, I also before I close off of the 60s, I'll discuss the case with Proud Mary by Ike and Tina Turner. As we all know, Proud Mary is a song recorded by Tina that was produced by the creepy whack job known Phil Spector, and run by songwriting duo Jeff Berry and Nellie Grinch, which there was a lot of songwriting duos in the 1960s. And pretty much River Deep Mountain, and I keep getting the song wrong. Sorry if I get certain songs wrong. It's River Deep Mountain High, not Proud Mary. I keep getting these songs wrong. So, if I have to correct myself, I have to correct myself. So, River Deep Mountain High, it's a song written by a married songwriting couple named Jeff Berry and Ellie Greenwich, which there was a lot of married songwriting couples in the 60s. And it was produced by Phil Spector, and River Deep Mountain High had the typical brill building pop sound and style. And River Deep Mountain High, in regards to the success of River Deep Mountain High, the success of River Deep Mountain High was it wound up flopping in the US charts. But if I remember correctly, I may get this wrong, it was big in Europe, which is some foreshadowing considering the fact Tina Turner, she wound up gaining a lot more fame in Europe, to the point she moved to Europe and lived there up until she passed away. And River Deep Mountain High, which Phil Spector thought to be his best work, it pretty much hurt him so badly to where he wound up going on a downward spiral. And the reason that Ike alleged why River Deep Mountain High didn't do so well was because of the changing landscape with black music during that time period, which was also coincided with Motown starting going on a downward spiral, because between 1967 and 1968, there's barely any hits. There's barely any crossover hits from Motown. And when it was also coincided with the with the rise of the Black Power movement, and black audience members gravitating to grittier soul, like with the likes of Otis Redding, Carla Thomas, Aretha Franklin, and like. And Ike Turner summarized it by stating how the song was too white for black radio and too black for white radio, which, as much as people hate the man, he is correct, because in fact, if you really look at it, remember River Deep Mountain High came out, that's when audience taste shifted in so many words. As I mentioned before, with the likes of grittier soulers like Otis Redding, Rising, and all, and pretty much black people drift away from crossover flavored R&B music. And then before I can move to the 80s, I should also know when it comes to Motown's Golden Age, that's the only era of Motown that people tend to romanticize. They never romanticized the 70s or 80s eras of Motown, where artists like Rick James, Jermaine Jackson, DeBarge, and like flourished. Because to me it seems like people feel Motown lost their spark when they deflected to Los Angeles. Even though there's a lot of great material from Motown 70s and 80s years. But now let's move on to the 80s, the Holy Trinity, which is Michael, Prince, and Whitney. And the reason why I named this the Holy Trinity, because in this decade, three well-known black artists, they became prominent in this era. And the first to start with is Michael Jackson. We all know yesterday was the 15th anniversary of Michael's passing, and Michael is like a case study in regards to crossover success. We all know Michael made it big as a member of his family band, the Jackson 5. And we all know his baby solo career started in the 70s when he was with Motown, but his adult solo career started in 1979 with the release of Off the Wall. And Off the Wall was like one of his first successes. But it didn't win any awards. It only won like one Grammy, if I remember correctly. And I feel like a lot of it stemmed from the anti-disco backlash that was going on in America, since Off the Wall was a very disco-tinged album, and people were over disco at that point. But with Thriller, Michael became a superstar success. He really became a huge success with Thriller. And pretty much broke and revolutionized the music industry. In so many words, that's how big of an album Thriller was. And it's quite disingenuous to put Thriller as number 2 next to The Education and Lauryn Hill. And this is no disrespect to Lauryn Hill, but Thriller was a big pop culture phenomenon and a big major success than The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. And we have to be honest about that. Though I feel like there is some music politics at play, and I'll leave it at that. But with huge success comes backlash. And a good chunk of it started with the whole situation with the Victory Tour. Like, one of the main problems with the Victory Tour was how expensive the concert tickets was. Because to give you a perspective, concert tickets in the 80s, they were like very affordable. Like, you pay like $10 a ticket just to see your favorite artist. But nowadays, which is cheap, super cheap compared to nowadays, where you have to pay $300 something just to $300 to $1,000 something just to see your favorite artist. But the promotion team, they sold the tickets to, if I remember correctly, they sold the tickets for only $35, but had this discount where they had to pay, where for 4 people they had to pay $10 or $40 for 4 people or something to that effect, which Michael disapproved of, but his family went along with it. It wound up alienating the lower class. the lower class fans that weren't able to afford tickets in the black community. Though Michael was able to pretty much, in a way, fix that situation. But the heat turned up even more when the bad era came, and when Michael released the bad album, the only thing everyone was concerned about was his appearance, not the fact he was releasing a new album. Well, it was obvious that he had plastic surgery done, and I really do not care about the plastic surgery. And I really do not care that much about the plastic surgery, and I feel like they over-exaggerated his plastic surgery. Because if you really look at pictures of Michael, he still looked like himself. It was just because of his bad makeup work. And plus, people get plastic surgery every day. So freaking way. And his skin color, which people already assumed that he bleached his skin, not knowing that Michael had a skin disorder called vitiligo, which causes splotches over your skin. And Michael, he wasn't bleaching his skin, he was depigmenting his skin to even it out. And even his autopsy, he had vitiligo. And there are people that knew him, like Cece Tyson, stated that the reason why Michael wore the glove was to cover the splotches from his vitiligo. And Michael showing signs of it since he was a kid. But everyone was literally dwelling over his appearance, and that's when I feel like mine's been so. And I'm not saying that everyone in the black community did this, but that was when some parts of the black community turned on Michael because they feel that Michael was selling out. And eventually there were some that felt that when Michael came out with Dangerous and History album, that those lies happened to him, they felt like Michael was only pandering to get back to the black audience, which is, I don't feel like he was pandering. But even with the crossover stuff, there are some fans that I feel like in my opinion, there are some people that are like stuck in the Thrillers because that's when you made music that was pop sounding and black sounding. And the reason they don't venture into his other eras like Dangerous History, because a lot of the music he made was not only more mature, but experimental. Like, Dangerous is one of my favorite albums from Michael over Thriller. I like some songs for Thriller, but Dangerous is my favorite album. Because it pretty much shows us the real Michael. And then the other well-known black crossover act was Prince. Prince came to prominence in 1978 with his first album, For You, which only had one single, Soft and Wet, and he wound up releasing another album called a self-titled album, which gave us I Want to Be Your Lover. And when Prince started out, Prince was like a funk artist with a multiracial band a la Sly and Family Stone. An album that pretty much put him on the map was 1999, which had a crossover hit in the titular song and Little Red Corvette. And at the same time, Prince was also producing side acts such as Vanity 6, known for having a very over-the-top sexualized image, fronted by Vanity. The stage name is Denise Matthews. May she also rest in peace. In the time, fronted by Boris Day, and whose two members will go on to become the most well-known producers of all time, producing for the likes of Janet, and pretty much becoming Janet Jackson's main producers. Now with Prince, but what pretty much shot Prince to the stratosphere was Purple Rain. And like And not only did the album became famous, but so did the movie, which I already reviewed on my previous podcast episode. Be sure to check it out. But in fact, out of all Prince's 39 albums, that's the main album people talked about. Purpling this, purpling that, purpling this, purpling that. Like, Purple Rain is not a bad album, but I kind of feel like it's an overhyped album because he made a lot more better material than Purple Rain. And speaking of, when Prince came out with his next album, Around the World in a Day, which he recorded around the time he was doing Purple Rain, it flopped because people, they romanticize the album now, but it didn't do well because it wasn't Purple Rain, which goes to show you how fickle-minded a lot of these pop fans are. They want, when the album goes successful, they want the next album to be exactly like the next album. But when they don't, they pretty much turn on you in a minute. Same thing with artists that want to mature. When artists mature, they don't like their new material, but they have no problem. But when the artists record their old material, they want to mature. You see what I mean? There's also the fact that Prince, and in the early part of his career, he did interviews downplaying his blackness, claiming to be mixed race, when in actuality, he was born to two monoracial light-skinned parents. I'm not making this up. You can go look this up. He did an interview with Rolling Stone in the 80s where he stated how he had a white mother and a black father, which is, like, I get what he was doing, but still, to literally lie about being mixed race just so you can pander to a crossover audience. And this is the funniest part. Prince didn't get any flack for not only lying about Biggie Big's race, but for not wifing up a black woman, even though most of the black women he dated were mixed race and are light-skinned black women. But yet, he didn't get criticized for that, but Michael got a lot of criticism, like, the math isn't freaking mathing. And then even when Prince did he did want to go back to his old roots with Parade and Silent Times, and even with Parade, he knew he was going back to his old roots. Some of his white bandmates, namely Wendy and Lisa, they took issue with that, which led to the conflicts between him firing them and creating a counter-revolution group. Which just gonna show you that Wendy and Lisa, they wanted to record the same old Beatles-esque tunes, but yet when Prince was going back to his roots, they had an issue with that. And it gets even worse with his 90s output, which in Diamonds and Pearls, he only recorded. The only reason he pivoted towards a hip hop sound with Diamonds and Pearls because the only reason why he pivoted towards a hip hop sound with Diamonds and Pearls, incorporating the rapper Tony M, was because pretty much to pander to the youth crowd who was into hip hop and New Jack Swing, because his old funk/pop sound wasn't appealing to the younger crowd. Not to mention his last movie, Graffiti Bridge, flopped, so he had to change up his style just to pivot towards the youth audience. And it worked. And that's not even gonna mention how some of the artists, the female artists that Prince promoted his career, they only became successful because of their looks, not because of their mediocre talent. And the sad part was there was talented women in Prince's circle like Sheila E., Rosie Gaines, Jill Jones alike, but they all got shelved in favor of the bimbos. And last but not least, there's Whitney Houston. Whitney pretty much came into the music industry. But to give a little background on Whitney, she came from a musical family. Her mother, CeCe Houston, was a well-known gospel singer and backing vocalist. Her cousin was a well-known legendary singer legendary singer Dionne Warwick. Her godmother was Aretha Franklin. So she pretty much started out as a model, then she wound up becoming a singer, being discovered by Clive Davis and taken under her wing by Jermaine Jackson. And her first album, which was self-titled, pretty much gave hits like Greatest Love of All, Saving All My Love, and You Give Good Love. And then her second album was a lot more poppy, which gave us the song and I may be incorrect, So Emotional, How Will I Know, and I Want to Dance with Somebody. But where her success comes backlash, Whitney, and amidst her success, she got a lot of backlash for pretty much being a black woman singing pop music or having crossover appeal, to the point that she was called that a certain black activist called her Whitey Houston. And when she won an award at the Soul Train Awards, she got booed. Yes, that's how worse the backlash was. She got booed at the Soul Train Awards when she won an award. And to give a little bit of perspective, the 80s was like the last great decade for black female soulful artists, because that was the decade when a lot of black artists with powerful voices were promoted, like Stephanie Mills, Phyllis Hyman, and the late Angela Bofill, Anita Baker, Vesta Williams, Stacey Lattishaw, Allison Wilson, and the like. They all became big in that decade. But a lot of those female artists, they all got shelved to the side in favor of artists who were easy on the eyes and had little or no vocal talent, or artists who were both easy on the eyes and had vocal talent. Because we all know that Clive Davis, we all know it's Phyllis, the sad story of Phyllis Hyman. Phyllis Hyman, she became very successful in the 70s and 80s for being a jazz/R&B singer. And Clive tried, being the shady demon that he was, tried to create a rivalry between her and Angela Bofill, who recently passed away, but they were actually real good friends. But as we all know, Clive pretty much ignored Phyllis because of her reluctance to cross over. And that, along with some personal problems she had, led to Phyllis pretty much taking her own life. And all of the above pretty much explain the whole, kind of somewhat give you a perspective on the backlash. Like, Whitney, she was attractive and she had vocal talent. But there were some that felt that she was being pushed over in front of more talented and equally talented singers. And in R&B and the Holy Trinity, they all pretty much kind of made R&B music mainstream, which will lead to our next decade, the 2000s, until now, the new millennium crossover trap. And the reason why I skipped to the 2000s instead of the 90s, because R&B was big in the 90s. R&B was big in the 90s, so I don't want to get into that. But to the 2000s, in my opinion, that was when they started promoting quote-unquote singers or sing artists over their with looks rather than artists with talent. And also when artists of a certain skin complexion started to be pushed. And all of this, and I'm going to pretty much start with J-Lo. Like, it's a known fact, an open secret, that J-Lo stole or siphoned all of her tracks. And I know I'm going to get some extreme J-Lo stands coming at me, but I don't care. Like, for example, in her first album, the song If You Had My Love was originally for Shantae Moore. Initially, it was offered to Michael Jackson, but he rejected it as he felt that the song was better recorded in the female perspective. And the song was offered to Shantae Moore under the title If You Had My Love. No, If I Gave You Love. But Diddy convinced Rodney to give the song to J-Lo, and the rest was history. Because if you really look at it, J-Lo literally made a career stealing people's songs and vocals. Like, for example, Jenny on the Block. I prefer the version of Jenny on the Block by Natasha Ramos than J-Lo's version. As some of the songs that she recorded that she stole from Ashanti, like I'm Real, which is the song where she used the N-word, which is problematic in of itself. And she almost had Amiri's One Thing if Amiri didn't put her foot down. And Amiri is another artist that needs her flower, that needs to be given her flowers. Amiri, because her sound was literally stolen and pretty much replicated like the Hella Cells. And Amiri, she first came to prominent by having with her hit Why Don't We Fall Love, and then her next hit, biggest hit was One Thing, which I remember hearing that before, not knowing the title of the song. I remember hearing that song for years on movie trailers and barely on the radio. Namely, it was featured in the movie trailer for Hitch. But as we all know, but Miri, what pretty much killed her career was her sound being oversaturated in the market by her producer, Rich Harrison. Namely, it was used in a couple of Beyonce songs, Destiny Child / Beyonce songs, Lose My Breath, Green Light, Lose My Breath, and Green Light. And then another example would be Don't Ya. Everyone's familiar with the version with Don't Ya, the version of the song Don't Ya that was recorded by the Pussycat Dolls. But did you know that there's an original version of the song that appeared in the movie that was recorded way back in 2003 and was in the Beauty Shop movie that was recorded by Tori Alamaze. Because the original version, Tori Alamaze version song, she recorded it and it was produced by CeeLo Green. It was only a moderate hit. It was like number 30 something on the dance charts, but the Pussycat Dolls, whose vocals were all recorded by Nicole Scherzinger, in which initially started out as a burlesque troupe, or however you pronounce it. Their version song, which wound up having a feature by Busta Rhymes, wound up becoming a big success, even being featured in Norbit. Which goes to show you just how slimy the business is. And that was when they started to push acts who were pretty much music acts that were pretty much a pretty face, but pretty face instead of a vocal powerhouse, with the likes of pushing acts like, or just so happen to be talented dancers with acts like Cassie, Beyonce, Rihanna, Alicia Keys, etc. being pushed, while acts like NDRE, Tweet, Danity Kane, Vivian Green, and more got screwed over either by the record labels or by their factors. And once we get back from this break, I'll discuss unique examples, aka the Wayne Brady effect, unsung / black fame in the art of gatekeeping, and my final thoughts once we get back on this break. Hello, welcome back guys to the show. Now before I get into unique situations, the reason why I didn't cover 2010s and 2020s is because it'll be hard for me to explain cross recess in the 2010s and 2020s, since pretty much R&B I pretty much mixed with a lot more genres and the alternate R&B craze, so it'll be hard for me to tackle those things. And plus, I really listen to modern day R&B music. Only listen to a few songs, so it'll be hard for me to tackle that subject. But anyway, back to the show. So, before the break, I stated there have been unique situations. About unique situations, and I refer to it as the Wayne Brady effect. Now, for those asking what that refers to, you know, when Wayne Brady first came into the scene of the comedic world as an improv actor on Whose Line Is It Anyway, he wind up pretty much being popular enough to get his own daytime talk show. Remember that? For those who were around in the 2000s, if you remember Wayne Brady show, please let me know. Let me know in the comments. But when Wayne Brady was popular, he got chastised by a lot of his fellow comedians for being quote-unquote whitewashed, i.e. not being the stereotypical black comedian that peppered and worded on his jokes or made crass humor. And it wasn't until he did that Training Day parody skit on the Chappelle Show that he was all of a sudden taken seriously. So this is referring to such I'm pretty much breaking up artists that pretty much found success in other genres that aren't R&B. Like, a good example would be Darius Rucker, who came to prominence as the frontman of Hootie and the Blowfish, which was a rock band. And then he tried to pretty much dip his toe in the R&B by releasing an album Arvin, but the R&B album did flopped and he wanted reinventing himself as a country singer. And speaking of country, it seems to me that, and speaking of country, there has been a lot of diversity in country music recently with the rise of black country artists like Mickey Guyton, King Brown, Shabuzi. I don't hope I got his name correct. Among other artists, with Beyonce even releasing a country album this year, which I listened to the album. It does have some great songs in the album, but country music is not my team because as my brother stated, country music, they all certain country songs, they all talk about the same thing, like backyard parties and all that. But still, country music is my kind of tea. Isn't my kind of tea, even though I'm a Southern girl. The backstory. And then another example would be Tracy Chapman, a folk who found success in the folk genre, and whose song recently gained some new resurgence thanks to a cover by Luke Combs. And the reason what these artists have in common, they all found success in non-R&B genres. Not to mention, there's Lenny Kravitz's claim that he wasn't supported by the black community because of him singing rock music, which is a half-truth considering the fact his music wasn't being promoted within the black community. Don't get me wrong, there are black people that listen to all types of music. Like myself, I have an eclectic taste of music, and I do listen to some rock music. But the part was like he should have had a bone to pick with the people who were promoting him instead of people in the black community, because they're the ones that should promote him to a black audience. Which is also a weird gatekeeping thing. And speaking of which, let's get into our next section, which is unsung / black fame and the art of gatekeeping. Now, for those who do not know what Unsung is a docu-series, is a 1-hour documentary series on TV One, which profiles artists that are pretty much virtually known in the mainstream that would be considered unsung. Their first episode was Unsung's first episode was on the DeBarge family. And nowadays, when people think of the DeBarge family, they think of the song Rhythm of the Night, which became popular again thanks to RuPaul's Drag Race, and also for their generational trauma. But the DeBarges, they're pretty much a big story's version of the Jacksons. Or they could have been bigger like the Jacksons if it wasn't for their issues. And artists they also covered was artists like Phyllis Hyman, Minnie Riperton, Mary Wells, Tina Marie, John B., Michelet, The Spinners, Bubba Moore, Heavy D, among others. Even though, and they've been skewing towards modern artists in recent years, but most of the artists were found unsung have in common is that they're only known within black pop culture, the black community. Like for example, the Spinners. It took them until last year for them to get inducted to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, even though they should have been inducted way back. If it was asking their cultural relevance, the Rubber Band Man was literally in a lot of movies. A lot of songs was in a like It's a Shame, I've Been Around, the Rubber Band Man was featured in a lot of movies. And the one unsung episode I've yet to see is an episode on Brenda Holloway, who was a very underrated Motown artist, who had who was very talented, but she was pushed by Motown to be a Mary Wells 2.0. Even go as far as recording the songs that were originally for Mary. And this also reflects some black famous and crossover famous. Like a lot of these acts, they were either black famous or did have some crossover success, but they only known within the black community. Like, for example, Tina Marie, even though she is a white artist, Tina Marie, she's a white artist known for singing R&B, and the one time she only went crossover was with the Star Child album, which gave us one of her number one hits, which I have on vinyl, called Love a Girl. That was the only album where she went crossover. Because a lot of artists reflect on saying in most of the stories that they got screwed over by the record labels, or that personal issues that stalled their careers. And I remember in the early seasons, they profiled a lot of Motown artists like Florence Ballard, David Ruffin, Eddie Kendricks. Oh my gosh, but for some reason they seem to not do that anymore. And that's probably the reason why we may or may not get a Brenda Holloway episode for Unsung, which I hope they do one on her, because she really fits the criteria to be unsung. Which would lead to another point that popped up in my head during the break. A lot of the Motown artists like David Ruffin, Mary Wells, and others that I mentioned, they all died poor or with financial issues. So poor, in fact, that their coffin, either they don't have a marking on their coffins, or the contemporaries or peers had to pay for their funerals or health bills. Like when David Ruffin passed away, Michael Jackson paid for his funeral, and not only paid for his funeral, but according to David's son, David Jr., he even attended his funeral in disguise. When Mary Wells was going through health issues, they raised a fund. A lot of people raised a fund. A lot of stars raised. Mary Wells led a fundraiser to pretty much raise funds for her cancer treatments. And to quote Rick James, even though people pretty much believe he only stayed that to pay this, a lot of these Motown stars, they went from traveling all over the world performing at venues like the Copacabana in London to pretty much being poor, picking out trash cans and all that. And there's also like a weird gatekeeping aspect of it. Like, there's a good and bad in gatekeeping, in my opinion. There are, like, the good meaning that in gatekeeping we keep out certain, pretty much the acts that are genuinely R&B, but then with the downside is gatekeeping is that we all think, like, gatekeeping is a very complicated thing. I'll leave it at that. And now my conclusions and final thoughts. It's pretty much I had a difficult time making this video because, like, as stated in the 5 Heartbeats, crossover it is nothing but a double cross. Like, crossover is like a double sword. Like, when you cross over, you have major success, but at the cost of alienating your original fan base. But when you don't cross over, you're only known to a certain fan base, or you're pretty much obscure. Or you're only known for your troubles. Like, the Barges, they broke up just as when they were about to have crossover success with Rhythm of the Night, which was their only music video. And the Barge, they're only known when they're the Black Beauty for pretty much their songs being sampled or interpolated in a lot of hip-hop and a lot of rap songs. And when they're not talking about that, then they're talking about their generational trauma stemming from their horror movie-esque childhood. And then with Michael Jackson, when he crossed over, which had a peak with Thriller pretty much into the bad era, he got critiqued over Coco selling out and trying to distance himself from his blackness, which wasn't all that true considering the fact he had a skin disorder that he had no control over. And then there's also the hypocrisy as well, like Prince literally lied about being mixed race and promoted women with a certain skin tone throughout his life and careers, but yet he's not called out nor held accountable for pretty much lying for the same things y'all critique Michael for. And then even today, there's like a crab in a barrel mindset when it comes to crossover artists that cross over to artists that don't, which I feel is never going to end. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I had a difficult time reviewing this episode. On the next episode, I'll get into. I decided, and for those wondering, I decided to scrap my Foster's retrospective because I feel like I won't do a good job doing the Foster's retrospective since I only watched the first few seasons and I missed out on certain storylines, so I probably won't go do a job of that. But the next podcast episode would be the Ice Cube trilogy problems. Then I'll do movie reviews on. Then I'll do an analysis on Tanya from 5 Heartbeats. Then a review on Beauty Shop and Why Do Fools Fall in Love. And some other feature episodes. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you want to listen to this podcast, go listen to it on wherever this podcast is available. To contact me if you want to contact me or leave comments or feedback or questions regarding this episode or previous episodes, contact me on my Instagram at Conversations with Celia Podcast or on my email cwxpodcast@outlook.com. Other than that, I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.